Welcome back to the No Code Conversations podcast, where founders and operators share the real story behind building their business from first idea to launch and beyond. Today, I'm joined by Daniel Bruce, a product and engineering leader who has worked across games, banking, payments, mobile apps, and high traffic service systems. He co-founded Albert, an invoicing and expenses app that was sold to Santander in 2018, and has worked with the companies including Electronic Arts, RBS NatWest, and the BBC. He's now working on Bertie Bookkeeper, an automated bookkeeping assistant for digital creators and online businesses. In this episode, we're talking about Daniel's journey through startups and product development, what it takes to build software people actually need and use, and the lessons founders should keep in mind when building their first MVP. Daniel, thank you for sharing your time with me.
Yeah, no worries. Great to be here.
Awesome. Great stuff. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you got started in tech entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so my background was primarily in software engineering. That's what I did for education, and I went through graduate programs as a software engineer. And I was quite lucky to land into it just as app stores were taking off. And so I had this vision of chasing my riches and building mobile apps for myself for a living. And so I think I had a bit of a false start in entrepreneurship because the first product I launched was with a really good friend, and we developed a game for the old Windows mobile phones, which is a very long time ago, and also Android, which is slightly more modern. And we grew that to about a million players. So it was a big piece of it was a big product. But because Android was rife with piracy, we didn't actually make any money from those million players. And so that's what I consider my false start. My real start in entrepreneurship was in California. My co-founder of my last business, which was Albert, which was also bookkeeping, and I were working for a company in California, but we were freelancers, and we were really struggling to keep on top of our invoicing, our expenses, and our books. And we quit these crazy high paying roles in California to take a gamble on building a bookkeeping product that would solve our own problem. That's the one that we eventually grew into Albert and then finally sold to Santander in about 2018. So yeah, like a false start, and then what I consider a very lucky start, because it's not very frequently that you sell your first go at it, really, is it?
No, that's fantastic. And you said there you got to about a million players. How did you manage that distribution? How did you actually, because obviously the building, especially nowadays, the building is the easier part. How did you get those players on board? I mean, that's quite a lot of people. What was the distribution play?
So this was back in a time where I think distribution was much easier than it is today, and so the way it happened was mainly through App Store features. So we frequently got featured on Google Play. We frequently got featured on the Amazon App Store. There were other app stores springing up all the time, trying to be the app store for Samsung, and so it was mainly through features. I think things are a lot harder nowadays, but back when mobile app stores were early and quality content was scarce, it was much easier to distribute.
Interesting. So would you go back into, I suppose, obviously with what you're working on now, it's a very different industry, but would you ever consider the gaming side again? I mean, what's your outlook on that market currently with mobile app games?
I think it's. I don't think I'm a good enough game developer. I really don't, and I think it's probably the most ruthless of them all. It's very much like every game's free and then tries to convince you with in-app purchases, and so what you need is like a massively wide funnel at the top. And I think that's essentially pay to play. There's not really any way to acquire the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of users you need to get through that funnel to the paid features in game. So I don't think I would focus on it again. No.
Interesting. Yeah, I suppose it's not something you can realistically bootstrap anymore. It requires, I suppose, a lot of funding to get those eyeballs onto it in the first place, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think there's always going to be the outliers and the people who are very lucky. But maybe I'm just a cautious entrepreneur now. But I don't think I'd focus on it.
Amazing. And thinking about Albert, what was the moment where you thought, let's take this and actually pursue it and build an MVP? What did that look like?
We were flying over the Atlantic. It was my co-founder and I at the time had been going back and forth about how we could do this, and it just so happened that our travel aligned. So we were traveling back from LAX to London Heathrow, And we built a prototype, like a clickable prototype, I think it was InVision it was called at the time. And by the time we'd landed, we'd naively convinced ourselves. And then later on in that week, we were in London, and so we went to a number of the pubs that we used to hang out in, and that we knew freelancers were there, and we showed them this prototype, and they were like, "That's exactly what I need to do my finances." And so I think our egos, because we thought, yeah, we're really good at building products, and some naivety that definitely slipped into there, convinced us that, yeah, this is the way to go. Like, to be fair, we had about 30 people telling us that this is what they wanted, which is a little bit of validation, but it's also a little bit of kind of false validation. But yeah, like that was essentially how we convinced ourselves to essentially quit some really fun, really high paying roles and kind of risk it all on zero salary for the first couple of years.
Wow, amazing. So I think the validation side is something that is very, very easy to skip. I mean, I know I've skipped it many times in previous projects, and when we work with clients now to sort of validate their MVPs and help them get started, they're very tempted to skip that because of how easy it is to go from the idea to actually like getting something live. The validation phase is, I suppose, it's one of the most important, apart from distribution, getting people to see it and understand what you do as a business. But speaking to those early set of customers and validating, is this a real problem solver or is it just a nice to have? That's something that's skipped. And when you spoke to those 30 people, did you have a structure around how you showed it, what kind of answers you were trying to get from them, or was it just a case of take a look at this, give us your feedback?
Yeah, so I think it's really important not to have an expected answer in mind, because it makes it very easy to push the conversation in that direction. And we did have like a lot of product experience between ourselves. And so how we did it is we approached people that we didn't really know that well. We knew them to be freelancers, but we didn't know them that well. Or we just approached them at the bar and asked them what they did. And if they started to kind of tell us they were freelancers, they were great to talk to. And so the first question we asked was, how did they manage it? And without fail, every single one of them had a some sort of thrown together workflow and told us how much they disliked it. And it was at that point that we showed them the demo. Now, I still think we led the conversation a little bit because we were green to it, but I think it was a fair attempt at validation, and definitely hearing that. I believe it was about 30, but the 30 out of 30 all explained to us this clunky workflow, and all explained, all portrayed some level of displeasure with it.
Brilliant. And did you find that any of those people in that initial set became paying customers or I suppose long-time users of it, or were they just a good set of people to get initial feedback from, but they never actually kind of used it once you went live?
We know well, so I don't know. I can't answer that. They may have signed up through our digital campaigns, etc. I can't say that we ever went back and tried to onboard. But what I will say, so when we shipped that first product, the first month, I think we managed to acquire about 17 customers, which isn't a lot, and 14 of them absolutely hated the first version, as is expected. 3 of them loved it and gave some really useful feedback, but one of those people was with us until we sold the whole business, that they loved it that much.
Fantastic. That's amazing. It's always fascinating to see how it kind of evolves from initial discussions to then building product champions and yeah, you say you had someone that stuck around for the full journey, which is yeah, it's amazing. So in terms of how that evolves from the initial prototype into an MVP, what was the time period there in terms of development time? Was it months? Was it weeks? Or was it year plus? Like how long did it take to go from that initial prototype to actually something you could launch and be confident in getting people on?
Not long at all. So the way it worked out and is we weren't just focused on the product. We'd kind of gone all in, and so we were looking to build the business as well. And so during product development, or the early stages of product development, we were also looking to get into various accelerators. And we managed to get into an accelerator. It was Telefonica's accelerator called Wyra. And so from landing in that accelerator where the work started in earnest to shipping our first version, I think it was about 6 to 8 weeks. And so that is I wouldn't say it's too long, but I think it's definitely towards the end of how long you should be spending on your, what you call, I don't like MVP, but your minimum desirable product. And this was back when there wasn't very much help through low code or no code tools. There certainly wasn't any AI. So I was building like a server system and a mobile app. And so that explains why it took probably around the 8 week mark.
Interesting. And you mentioned that you don't like MVP and you go for the, I suppose, the more minimum desirable product there. How do you differentiate the two in your mind?
So MVPs, it's a judgment call. An MVP, you can kind of tell it's an MVP, not because it's buggy. Like if it's buggy, that's not an MVP, but because it looks like an MVP or it feels like an MVP. Whereas an MDP or a minimum desirable product tends to be one feature, very limited and done really well to really test, is this the thing that people are going to find value in?
Fantastic. Brilliant. And I want to talk a little bit about, I suppose, that transition from working for larger organizations into, I suppose, the founder lifestyle, the entrepreneurship, pursuing your own thing. What did that transition look like for you? Was it something that was stressful? Was it come quite naturally? Had you done anything before, sort of a side project while working in bigger organizations? What was that like?
Yeah, it was brutal. Like if I'm going to be honest, it was really brutal to go from a very large income to zero, and then watching your bank balance get smaller every month. That was really tough. Side project, yes. So the game that I mentioned earlier on, that was the first side project that we did, and so I guess the first 3 months are you're all buoyed by the, oh look, we've got an accelerator who believes in us. We've raised a little bit of money. It was about £17,000, so it wasn't a lot of money at all. Um, and so you're overly confident in that first 3 months. As you hit month 6 or month 9, and you're starting to get a little bit nervous, that can be a really brutal time period. I think our nerves started to get a little bit better when we raised our first investment round, which was around the 12 to 15 month mark.
Amazing. And what did it look like to go from there to the acquisition? How did you have to shift the way the business operated, or was it built to sell from the very beginning?
I wouldn't say that it was built to sell from the very beginning, but our due diligence was relatively smooth because my founder at the time was a fantastic designer and followed fantastic design protocols. We were both really good at products, so all of our product stuff was documented. I handled the ops and the finance of the business, and I've got a lot of experience in that. So all that process was documented, and our engineering product was also perhaps even a little bit overbuilt, maybe a little bit too good for kind of the stage of the business. But it certainly helped when we went through due diligence. Like we passed it all with flying colours. So I think how did it kind of mutate over the years? It got a little bit bigger. If anything, the pressure maybe got a little bit less because we were feeling more confident in ourselves, our processes were in place. I think it maybe got, on one side, delivery got a little bit boring, and that's a really good place to be in because you knew what customers needed, you knew how they'd react when you built it, you knew how long it was going to take to build it, and then you shipped it to them. And so we just got into this kind of almost, yeah, just like a bit of a boring cycle, as it were.
Interesting. I think that boring cycle is often actually where entrepreneurs get shiny object syndrome and think, I'm bored in the business now, let's try and start something new. And suddenly you've got 3 or 4 businesses because you've got to that stage where you know the whole business inside out and it's boring to you, but it's still obviously serving customers. And instead of going all in and just scaling that boring side, they think, right, where can I shift my attention to now? Did you have any temptations around losing sight of that business and maybe shifting elsewhere?
No, for some, I'm a really boring nerd, and I really like the technology side of things because I can build a business, and I really like the finance side of things because I can understand a business, and so I think bookkeeping scratches that itch. So I'm a massive nerd when it comes to stuff like that. What I will say, and I think it's becoming more and more pertinent, the shiny object syndrome, as there's claims that the cost of building is heading towards zero. I don't believe that, but that's a wider conversation. But what I think the piece of advice that I would give to anybody who gets shiny object syndrome is You don't build a successful business by being fastest or by being first or by bringing the cost of building to zero. You build a successful business by just doing the boring stuff day in, day out over a long enough time frame that your competitors die out. And then either you're the biggest player in the market and you're making the most money, or somebody has to acquire you. And so I think that's something that's very much missing in this day and age. And that is that building a business is mostly about persistence, not shiny objects.
Hmm. Great. And how has that thinking evolved into what you're doing with Bertie at the moment? Obviously, it's in a similar space. What's the thinking behind Bertie and kind of retrying this? I suppose this type of project again.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of really interesting things that make Bertie exciting right now. The first is that the space hasn't moved on since we sold Albert. If you look at the old way of doing things, which would have been bookkeepers with spreadsheets or even paper-based spreadsheets, we're still in that version. It's just the zeros, the QuickBooks have made people do it on a screen rather than on a piece of paper. These people still have like a carrier bag of receipts or a digital carrier bag of receipts. And Albert, the initial business, really was a step ahead of all of them because we did automate some elements of it. I think what's happened now is it's become possible to completely self-assemble a business's books based upon context, such as bank feeds, such as email inboxes, such as Stripe APIs, such as KDP information, such as Etsy, such as Airbnb. All this information is now electronic, and yet we're still stuck in this old way of doing things. And Bertie's going to be the new way of doing things that essentially says, why should a digital artisan have to spend their weekend doing their books when the technology exists to free them from it completely?
Fantastic. And who's the ideal customer then? You mentioned digital artisans, and is it for the creator economy? Is it for the sort of solo freelancer? Who's the ICP?
Yeah, I think so. I think digital artisan covers a number of different sectors, and that's indicative of how freelancing or small businesses are done in the UK with sole traders and limited companies and various different types. But it's very much people who run most of the financial side of their business digitally or electronically, and that means that they are the people who. So somebody who runs their, it's a persona. So somebody who runs a KDP business, like a Kindle business, and somebody who runs an Etsy business probably run their businesses very similarly. Or they might even be the same person because they have a Kindle bringing a revenue stream from one side, and they also do some Etsy selling on the other side. So it's very much about people who make their money through digital IP.
Brilliant. And you've spent, I suppose, a lot of your career simplifying very complicated processes, and I suppose, yeah, a lot of complexity and a lot of things that would typically cause people headache, and distilling that down into a very simple product. So what are some of the key learnings that you found that maybe you could share with other founders, other entrepreneurs, for taking, I suppose, a big cloud of complexity and just building something super simple? How do you go about that? What's your process?
I'm going to sound a little bit mad, but talk to yourself. And so what I
Right.
mean by that is if you've got a complicated process and you can't describe it to yourself, let alone somebody else, like you were a 5-year-old, then you don't understand the process enough to be able to simplify it yet. And so, and I think I can take that a step further. The processes that I've simplified over time have always been ones where I've felt the pain acutely, either because I've been in an organization that said, there's a problem here, we need an engineering solution to that, or because I've felt it in my everyday life, such as the bookkeeping side of things.
And how does that reflect into, I suppose, the team dynamic and the team structure that you have? Because a lot of people will just be the CTO, the founder, the CEO themselves. Whereas from what I understand, you have a really strong team with people who have got expertise in different disciplines and areas. How do you find those types of people?
So I think the first thing I'd say, and so the C-level titles, especially in year one and year two, are very much for pleasing investors or going raising money, or even as a bit of an ego trip. I think early on, the best thing any founder can have is a diverse team. And was it Bezos who said this? Somebody said this, but it's strong beliefs weakly held. And so just because I've got a good engineering head on my shoulders doesn't mean that I'm the best person to think of a solution, because I might try and overcomplicate it. And so it's really about sitting there and having open discussions, allowing a little bit of creative tension to kind of drift in. Like, creative tension is really good as long as it doesn't get disrespectful. And so I think what I'm getting at in a roundabout way is the C-level titles don't mean anything in an early stage business. There's an argument they don't mean much in a medium stage startup, but that's fine. And then the other thing is just being really open and having conversations and trying to not only see the other person's point of view, but actively be trying to prove yourself wrong all the time.
Amazing. And building Bertie, building Albert, your career so far, what's been the hardest part for you? What's been the most challenging, or where you've kind of thought, is this all worth it? Is this journey worth it?
Um, Honestly, probably not building the businesses. It's I guess there's two sides. The one is, and this comes from a real place of privilege, but when you're working for a corporate or like any company that gives you a lot of money, it's really nice to have the money coming in, but I always felt a bit hollow inside, or I found my work days were very frustrating because I saw bad decisions being made that I knew were going to bite us down the line. And so that's one of the more um, disappointing or frustrating experiences. I guess the hardest part of building any startup is those first few months when you've taken the plunge and you're not earning any money, and you don't know if you're going to be able to pay your rent or make payroll or pay your mortgage. They're definitely the harder times.
Great. So with the new project, is there any areas that you're planning on doing completely differently compared to the first time round? Or if you were to, let's say, start again tomorrow, is there anything that you've learned that you would take into that to do differently?
I think I think a lot of so we're still very on in early on in Bertie, and Albert was quite mature when we sold that, and so I think we're still in the phase where we're going to take that, cookie cutter it as the starting point for Bertie. But I do think that obviously as we move forward, we should be learning kind of new things along the way. It would be really embarrassing if in 2 years' time we're still running on a 2-year-old playbook.
Great stuff. Daniel, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'll leave you with one final question, which is where can people support you? Where can people sign up to Bertie if they're interested? Can they reach out on LinkedIn? Is there a wait list? Yeah, where can people find you and support the
Yes,
project?
so they can absolutely reach out on LinkedIn. Like, I've spent a lot of time over the last few years. I've been very fortunate to sell one company, so a lot of time over the last few years advising entrepreneurs and engineers and product people. So I'm super approachable on LinkedIn. We do have a wait list. It's at getbertie.com. And so yeah, anybody can go there and sign up, and they'll get access to the wait list, but they'll also get access to frequent product updates.
Fantastic. Amazing. Daniel, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Which it was great meeting you.
Cheers.
Catch you later.